As usual, the crew were nearly all drunk, and before the sail could be properly taken in, a violent squall laid the brig on her beam ends. By keeping her away, however, she righted, having shipped a good deal of water. Scarcely was everything insecure when another squall took the vessel, and immediately afterward another, no damage being done. There was every appearance of a gale of wind, which indeed came shortly on, with great fury. From the northward and westward, all was made as snug as possible, and we laid to, as usual, under a close reefed foresail. As night drew on, the wind increased in violence, and with a remarkably heavy sea. Peters now came into the forecastle with Augustus, and we resumed our deliberations. We agreed that no opportunity could be more favorable than the present for carrying our design into effect, as an attempt at such a moment would never be anticipated. As the brig was snugly laid to, there would be no necessity of maneuvering her until good weather, when, if indeed we succeeded in our attempt, we might liberate one, or perhaps two of the men, to aid us in taking her into port. The main difficulty was the great disproportion in our forces. There were only 3 of us. In the cabin there were 9. All the arms on board, too, were in their possession, with the exception of a pair of small pistols, which Peters had concealed about his person, and a large seaman's knife which he always wore in the waistband of his pantaloons. From certain indications, too, such, for example, as there being no such thing as an axe or a handspike lying in their customary places, we began to fear that the mate had suspicions, at least in regard to Peters, and that he would let slip no opportunity of getting rid of him. It was clear indeed that what we should determine to do could not be done too soon. Still, the odds were too much against us to allow of our proceeding without the greatest caution. Peters proposed that he should go up on deck and enter into conversation with the watch, Allan, when he would be able to throw him into sea without trouble and without making any disturbance, by seizing a good opportunity, that Augustus and myself should then come up and endeavor to provide ourselves with any kind of weapons from the deck, and that we should then make a rush together and secure the companionway before any opposition could be offered. I objected to this because I could not believe that the mate, who was a cunning fellow in all matters which did not affect his superstitious prejudices, would suffer himself to be so easily entrapped. The very fact of there being a watch on deck at all was sufficient proof that he was upon the alert, if not being usual, except in vessels where discipline is most rigidly enforced, to station a watch on deck when a vessel was lying to in a gale of wind. As I address myself principally, if not altogether, to persons who have never been to sea, it may be as well to state the exact condition of a vessel under such circumstances. Lying to, or in sea parlance, laying to, is a measure resorted to for various purposes, and effected in various manners. In moderate weather, it is frequently done with a view of merely bringing the vessel to a standstill, to wait for another vessel or any similar object. If the vessel which lies to is under full sail, the maneuver is usually accomplished by throwing round some portion of her sails so as to let the wind take them back when she becomes stationary. But now we're speaking of lying to in a gale of wind. This is done when the wind is ahead and too violent to admit of carrying sail without danger of capsizing, and sometimes even when the wind is fair, but the sea too heavy for the vessel to be put before it. If a vessel be suffered to scud before the wind in a very heavy sea, so much damage is usually done her by the shipping of the water over her stern. Sometimes by the violent plunges she makes forward. This maneuver then is seldom resorted to in such a case, unless through necessity. When the vessel is in a leaky condition, she is often put before the wind, even in the heaviest seas. For when lying to, her seams are sure to be greatly opened by her violent straining, and it is not so much the case when scudding. Often, too, it becomes necessary to scud a vessel, either when the blast is so exceedingly furious, so as to tear to pieces the sail which is employed with the view of bringing her head to wind, or when, through the false modeling of the frame or other causes, this main object cannot be affected. Vessels in a gale of wind are laid to in different manners according to their peculiar construction. Some lie to best under a foresail, and this, I believe, is the sail most usually employed. Large square-rigged vessels have sails for the express purpose called storm staysails. But the jib is occasionally employed by itself, sometimes the jib and foresail on a double-reefed foresail, and not unfrequently the after sails are made use of. Foretop sails are usually very often found, to answer the purpose better than any other species of sail. The grampus was generally laid to under a close reefed foresail. When a vessel is laid to be laid to, her head is usually brought up to the wind just so nearly as to fill the sail under which she lies when hauled flat aft, that is, when brought diagonally across the vessel. This being done, the bows point within a few degrees of the direction from which the wind issues, and the windward bow, of course, receives the shock of the waves. In the situation, a good vessel will ride out a very heavy gale of wind without shipping a drop of water, and without any further attention being requisite on the part of the crew. The helm is usually lashed down, but this is altogether unnecessary, except on account of the noise it makes when loose. For the rudder has no effect upon the vessel when lying to. Indeed, the helm had far better be left loose than lashed very fast, for the rudder is apt to be torn off at heavy seas if there be no room for the helm to play. As long as the sail holds, a well-modeled vessel will maintain her situation and ride every sea, as if instinct with life and reason. If the violence of the wind, however, should tear the sail to pieces, a feat which it requires a perfect hurricane to accomplish under ordinary circumstances, there is then imminent danger. The vessel falls off from the wind, and coming broadside towards the sea is completely at its mercy. The only resource in this case is to put her quietly before the wind, letting her scud under until some sail can be set. Some other sail can be set. Some vessels will lie to under no sail whatever, but such are not to be trusted at sea. But to return from this digression, it has never been customary with a mate to have any watch on deck when lying to in a gale of wind, and the fact that he now has one coupled with the circumstance of the missing axes and handspikes, fully convinced us that the crew were too well on the watch to be taken by surprise in the manner Peters had suggested. Something, however, was to be done, and that with as little delay as practicable, for there could be no doubt that suspicion having been once entertained against Peters, he would now have been sacrificed upon the earliest occasion, and one would certainly be either now found or made upon the breaking of the gale. Augustus now suggested that if Peters could contrive to remove, under any pretext, the piece of chain cable which now lay over the trap in his stateroom, we might possibly be able to come upon them unawares by means of the hold. But a little reflection convinced us that the vessel rolled and pitched too violently for any attempt of that nature. By good fortune, I at length hit upon the idea of working upon the superstitious terrors and guilty conscience of the mate. It will be remembered that one of the crew, Hartman Rogers, had died during the morning, having been attacked 2 days before with spasms after drinking some spirits and water. Peters had expressed to us his opinion that this man had been poisoned by the mate, and for this belief he had reasons, so he said, which were so incontrovertible, but which it could not be prevailed upon to explain to us, this wayward refusal being only in keeping with other points of his singular character. But whether or not he had any better grounds for suspecting the mate than we had ourselves, we were easily led to fall in with his suspicion, and determined to act accordingly. Rogers died about 11 in the forenoon in violent convulsions, and the corpse presented a few minutes after death one of the most horrid and loathsome spectacles I had ever remembered to have seen. The stomach was swollen immensely, like that of a man who has been drowned and laid underwater for many weeks. The hands were in the same condition, while the face was shrunken, shriveled, and of a chalky whiteness, except were relieved by 2 or 3 glaring red blotches, like those occasioned by the erysipelas. One of these blotches extended diagonally across the face, completely covering up an eye as if with a band of red velvet. In this disgusting condition, the body had been brought up from the cabin at noon to be thrown overboard, when the mate, getting a glimpse of it, for he now saw it for the first time, and being either touched with remorse for his crime or struck with terror at so horrible a sight, ordered the men to sew the body up in its hammock and allow it the usual rites of sea burial. Having given these directions, he went below as to avoid any further sight of his victim. While preparations were making to obey his orders, the gale came on with great fury, and the design was abandoned for the present. The corpse left to itself was washed in the larboard scuppers, where it still lay at the time of which I speak, floundering about with the furious lurches of the brig. Having arranged our plan, we set about putting in execution as speedily as possible. Peters went up on deck as he had anticipated, and was immediately accosted by Allan, who appeared to be stationed at more than once as a watch upon the forecastle than for any other purpose. The fate of this villain, however, was speedily and silently decided. For Peters, approaching him in a careless manner, as if about to address him, seized him by the throat, and before he could utter a single cry, tossed him over the bulwarks. He then called out to us, and we came up. Our first precaution was to look up for something with which to arm ourselves, and in doing this, we proceeded with great care, for it was impossible to stand on deck against it without holding fast, and violent seas broke over the vessel at every plunge forward. It was indispensable, too, that we should be quick in our operations, for every minute we expected the mate to be up and to set the pumps going, as it was evident the brig must be taken in water very fast. After searching for some time, we could find nothing more fit for our purpose than 2 pump handles, one of which Augustus took and I the other. Having secured these, we stripped off the shirt of the corpse and dropped the body overboard. Peters and myself then went below, leaving Augustus to watch upon the deck, where he took his station just where Allan had been placed, and with his back to the cabin mate, so that if any of the mate's gang should come up, he might suppose it was the watch.